Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the People Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Andy Davies, the Chair of the Committee. We'll do some housekeeping first of all. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening. In the event of a fire, please leave by the doors behind you, and we'll gather near the nearest fire exit. Now, in the event of a fire, do we have like a list of people who are in the building? We do have one, and that's quite accessible to everyone, is it? Reception, right. So if you look at who's sitting next to you, so in the event of a fire this evening, just make sure that person's out of the building safely as well, and that will all be well. Hopefully that's not going to... No, that's not okay. Okay. Try not to forget about him, okay. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Please note that while we try and live stream the meeting, technical issues do occur from now and again. Should it happen, we'll try and get them going again, but whatever happens, due to disruption, it's not going to forget the legality of the meeting. Any remote participants we have, please can ensure your microphones, please, are on mute. And should you wish to speak, please raise your virtual hand. Thank you very much. If you've got mobile phones, can you ensure they're switched off and laptops are muted as well? And before a member speaks, if you'd like to introduce yourself. So we can now introduce ourselves. I'm Councillor Andy Davies. We could go around in this direction.
I'm Tom Dodge from Council's Strategy and Scrutiny Manager.
I'm Councillor Duncan Kerr from Oswestry South.
Councillor Thomas Clayton, Shiphill North.
Councillor Terry Trickett from Bayston Hill.
Councillor Ruth Houghton to Bishop's Castle and the portfolio holder for social care.
Alan Mosley, Castlefield in Ditherington in Shrewsbury.
Shelley Williams, Service Manager for Adult Social Care, Care and Wellbeing.
Good evening, I'm Sonia Miller, I'm the Service Director for Children and Young People.
Good evening, I'm David Shaw, I'm Director of Children's Services.
Susan Coleman, Councillor for Severn Valley.
Mandy Duncan, Councillor for Sundon and Old Heath in Shrewsbury.
Mark Morris, Councillor for the Strettons.
Shelley Davies, Committee Officer. Sophie Foster, Overview and Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you all very much for those introductions. Do we have any... Oh, online as well, please. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Natalie. Hi, I'm Natalie McFall. I'm the Interim Director of Adult Social Services.
Thank you, Natalie.
Evening, everybody. I'm Lisa Gardner. I'm the Temporary Business Manager of the Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnerships Business Unit.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for that. Any apologies for absence? None received. Disclosable pecuniary interests, anyone?
The safeguarding, I'm safeguarded because I run a private hire business, and we may possibly at times do some send transport, not as we're doing any at the minute, but we do school runs. So of course there are possibilities that there's children on those runs that I don't know are sent, but I better declare it.
Okay, I think that's thank you for that. This is more so safeguarding strategy and policy. Should be okay, but thank you very much. Anyone else? No, thank you. Can we look at the minutes, please, of the meeting held on the 14th of January? Do we have any comments regarding the minutes? Can we have a proposer, please? Thank you, Mark. And seconder? Thank you very much for that. We have received no public questions, and we have received no member questions. So move on. First of all, thank the officers for slight change of where we work this evening. The reports have been far more condensed. So we decided that rather than having a very lengthy, very sort of narrative, very informative reports which we've had in the past, we have very focused, specific reports from the officers. Next change is when the officer is presenting the report, you will have between 5 and 10 minutes to actually do your report. That then allows more time for members to actually scrutinise what the officers have actually asked. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the papers prior to the meeting. We just send an email out. So once we've had a report, we'll then go into the questions of it to make sure all the members are happy. At the end of that report, we'll then discuss whether there's any further action which is required, whether we need to consider it for the work programme for the following year as well. Is that okay for everyone? Lovely, thank you. So we'll move on to the performance monitoring report for Q4 25-26 care and wellbeing, and this is going to be presented by Michelle. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm just going to give a very short, straightforward overview of what the report's telling us, and assume that it's been read in advance. So social care supports some of the most complex needs in the county, often at points of crisis, and demands can change very quickly. The report evidences how we keep people safe, manage the demand and stay on top of cost pressures. If we look at care package reviews first, reviews are our way of checking that people are getting the right level of support, that their care still meets their needs, and that public money is being used appropriately. This year we've completed over 4,400 reviews of the 5,300 odd people that are receiving funded support. This shows continued progress year on year from the previous reporting years. We acknowledge that there are some reviews that are still overdue, but the key point for members is how that risk is managed. We don't just deal with reviews on a first come, first served basis. We prioritise people where needs have changed, where risks are higher, or where there are safeguarding concerns. The majority of people with overdue reviews have care in place, providing multiple layers of oversight, such as including having care from care providers who can come to us at any point to escalate if there's a change of need. Through safeguarding routes, they might have a deprivation of liberty safeguard in place, and through external monitoring of quality of care for our contracts monitoring support. Where a formal review is delayed, people aren't left unattended. As I said, providers will remain in contact and escalate any changes in people's presentation and care levels. Looking at review outcomes overall, it shows that generally the support people are receiving is usually right. We're not seeing any unmanaged drift into more expensive care, evidencing that reviews help control costs, not drive them up. Reviews show that generally support, the outcomes of the reviews are people's support stays the same. And where we can, we will reduce support, people's outcomes have improved. In relation to helping people make informed choices, it's important for members to understand that the council's role isn't to tell people what care to choose. Our role is to help people understand their options, be clear about the long-term impact of these choices, and avoid decisions that lead to crisis later on. So this includes providing people with clear information for people who pay for their own care, supporting carers early to avoid unavoidable crises, and helping people plan ahead rather than waiting until something breaks down. This approach sits behind the new care and wellbeing operating model, which is about earlier advice, prevention, and reducing unavoidable emergencies. In line with why our costs and demands feel quite unpredictable, which is why an area that Scrutiny wanted us to report on. Adult social care demand doesn't grow smoothly. We work with people, they can be unpredictable at times, meaning it can often spike suddenly. We know our main reasons for demand in Shropshire are that we've got an ever-growing population, those that are older, over 75 and growing. We've got people with more complex needs, and people moving into Shropshire from other places. We've also seen over the last 2 financial years demand in particular from NHS funded residents who are no longer eligible for that care, as detailed in the report. This year that's up to around £2.5 million of additional pressure that social care were not aware of. It doesn't mean that the system's not being managed. In relation to our demands, we monitor spend and activity very closely every month. We work with our finance colleagues so that we can plan for pressure rather than being caught by surprise. In relation to the NHS pressure, we work really closely with colleagues in the ICB to understand the work that they're doing to clear some of their backlogs of reviews, so that we can plan as much as possible to have the resource ready to step in and assess those people. In relation to capital reduction and deferred payments, we know, and thankfully Cabinet approved, a change to our deferred payment approach more recently. This means that we've got clearer rules, there's a better financial protection for the council and a fairer, more transparent system for residents. As a result, the financial risk around deferred payments is much better managed. Our capital reduction demand, as we've previously reported, is a major pressure. We see growing numbers of people moving into Shropshire, acquiring care, and then needing to approach the council to support with funding that care when they run out of money. Last year, that's equated for around 5 million pressure across adult social care. So, as I mentioned before, our new operating model of working with people earlier to provide them with the right support and options will help manage that risk better. So in summary, reviews are improving and risks are actively managed. Some demand and costs remain unpredictable, but they are well understood and monitored. And financial risks around capital reductions and deferred payments are on a much firmer footing. And the service is focused on helping people earlier, not just reacting later.
Thank you very much indeed. There's so much information in that report, and the questions I've highlighted, you've answered most of those whilst you're there as well. So thank you very much. If I could just come back just to one point, please. I think you more or less talked about this. With the reviews which are still sort of outstanding, I know you've looked at the actual circumstances and sort of prioritised reviews. How can you ensure the council that the individuals assessed who are at lower risk are not experiencing any sort of cumulative harm?
So, as I mentioned in the summary, people are receiving support. So they've got providers that are involved with them that will escalate to us. In relation to lower level risk, the only ones that have overdue reviews are 117 clients who will have a primary care key worker in relation to oversight of their mental health needs. So we will work with them in an MDT arena to support us to raise any concerns they've got so that we can step in and review sooner if there are worries that their needs aren't being met. They're accessing.
Yeah. So you're fully aware of their needs and their requirements, so they're not going underneath the radar, even though you're still dealing with it. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions, please?
Yes, thank you, Mandy Duncan, Sunderland and Old Heath. Yeah, I just want to recognise all of the work that you've done in reducing the backlog. I think that's definitely something that we need to note and thank you for. As you pointed out, that there are still a significant number of reviews that are outstanding for a variety of reasons, and that means probably we're still providing sort of more care and for longer than is absolutely necessary in some cases. So I'm just wondering, what is the target now for completing those outstanding reviews? Have you sort of set out some definite targets by when you want that to happen?
So the way we approach reviews is quite flexible, depending on the demand into specific areas. Obviously, we prioritise people in the community that come to us as brand new with no support where there are identified risks. But how we allocate reviews and prioritise reviews is flexible, depending on the presented needs. There are very clear plans across all of the service areas to bring their targets down, their overdue reviews down, and to meet targets. Some areas are achieving greater than others, depending on their other demand into those areas and their resource. But there's very clear plans across all. We provide quarterly report updates into the DAS in relation to that performance and what those key actions are. And if we're not satisfied with the trajectory and the progress, we'll alter those actions. We'll draw on support from other services, other areas of the service as well, if there are any key risks in other areas where they can't address.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's reassuring. I think it might actually be really helpful for us to see that at some point, or just see an overview or a summary of what that kind of action plan and timeline might look like. But thank you for that.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, Duncan Kerr, Oswestry South. Just have a look at the table on page 11, which is reviews completed and number of people reviewed. Quite clearly over the last 4 years, there's been an increase, but the increase is slowing quite considerably. Just wondering if you've got any views as to why that is and whether you think it will continue to increase or plateau in the future.
Page 11, did you say?
Yes, it's page 16 on the back. 11 on the report. It's just the head. It's just the graph that shows reviews completed.
I was going to say, yeah, that looks like it's
page 10 here, but it's page 5 there. Pages. Thank you, Alan. Both graphs show an increase, but the rate of increase is significantly reducing over the 4 years. If you look between 2022-3, 2023-4, there's about a 12% increase there, whereas the increase this year over last year is only about 3%. So it's a reduction, which is interesting. And I'm just wondering whether it's attributable to anything that's happened, or whether that's a sort of trend that it may plateau in the future. Obviously, you know, this is a very expensive service, and we're trying to predict what future demand might be. And I'm just looking at the graph and I'm wondering, well, it seems to be, the increase seems to be reducing, but maybe I'm misreading that graph.
Thank you. Go away and look at the data a little bit closer. Information on that if that's needed.
I appreciate it, because it's just trying to get a feeling as to whether, because I suppose all I've learned about Shropshire is that the increase in care needs is going to continue and continue and continue, and it won't reduce. But these two graphs do seem to show still increasing, but a reduction in the rate of increase, put it in that sort of way. I'm just interested to see whether that's a valid picture or perhaps a misleading picture.
Susan. Oh, and just on that, so are you saying that actually this is the same group? Did you use your microphone? Sorry.
This one.
That this is the same group of people that you're talking about here. It's not the whole group, it's just the group that have been reviewed.
So people over a year.
Yes.
People will come in and out of the service, their services might so over a year, the same person might not be in receipt of a service throughout the whole year, so they might be reviewed, and then the service might end for whatever reason. So the numbers can fluctuate in relation to the number of people that are actually overdue and receiving a service.
It's good to see that the numbers are slowing slightly, but we still have a substantial number that are overdue. If I'm understanding, it's about a third. Is that right?
It's like 36%.
Yeah, it's about a third. And that's quite considerable, you know, in relation to what it is we're talking about here. So a third of people aren't being reviewed and therefore their care may be more than they need or less than they need. What's the reason for not being able to keep up with them? Is it simply a staffing issue that you don't have enough people to carry out these reviews?
So it's about balancing risk. So as I mentioned before, we prioritise people that are at risk. So people that have got no support in place.
Yeah.
We'll prioritise assessing them. Obviously, we prioritise people that need a review as well, but it's about balancing that risk.
I understand that, but in the real world, we should be having everybody who requires a review should be having one. A third of people aren't having one. I'm just trying to understand what's causing that delay. Is it you don't have enough people?
It is
to do
how
everybody?
we use the resource, yes.
Yeah.
So our resource isn't sufficient to cover new demand and existing demand, and we use the resource as creatively and flexibly as we can.
Yes.
But I think we worked out the resource would be around 20 people purely doing reviews on a full-time basis.
Yes.
Which would mean that we might not necessarily always manage to react to demand as it comes in across the rest of the service.
It begs the question that, you know, we've got a facility to borrow 192 million from the government to keep our services running, whether we're trying to secure some of that money, additional money, so that we can reduce this delay considerably, or are we just carrying on as we have done? Are we trying to get some more funding into this service?
Natalie's got a hand up. She wanted to come in on that point.
And Natalie, would you like to come in on that point? Thank you.
Hi colleagues, apologies if this has already been covered. The sound online did dip out, so apologies if this has. Just to pick up on review activity and demand, over the last couple of years we've tried to do a lot of targeted work around our waiting lists and reviewing our waiting lists at the front door. As we've improved in terms of our waiting list numbers, more people have come into the service, hence come into the review cycle. So while we've been reviewing more people, actually more people have been coming into the review cycle as we've worked through those waiting lists. So it's been an interesting trend really of seeing that improved performance at the front door, but then for those people that need to be in receipt of a service coming into the review cycle, and then that increasing the demand in that area, and then trying to look at how we mobilise our capacity to do that. One of the things we are looking to do in the future is we're improving the resilience at the front end of the service, and it will be part of the new operating model. And that will be our community independence pathway, where we provide a much more rigorous intervention up front prior to people having their Care Act assessment. And actually all of this is interconnected. So as we're managing that demand at the front, it might actually impact on the amount of people that go into that review cycle. So it's just to kind of understand that, you know, all of those areas, as you target some, other areas will go up, and we really recognise that reviews is an area that we need to continually have oversight and adapt our approach to, particularly when we're working on the waiting list, and if people do need to come into the service and enter into that kind of annual review cycle, or need a review because there's been a change in their needs. Thank you.
That doesn't really answer my question. My question is, we know those numbers are going up. As Duncan said, the numbers are always going to be going up. Are we going to take the opportunity to use some of the additional funding that we've got access to do something about recruiting more staff to get these waiting reviews down?
Yeah, so we are looking at plans at the moment as part of that new operating model, and looking at areas where we feel that we can transform. I've just sort of mentioned the community independence pathway, and all of that is around managing demand in a different way, improving outcomes and really supporting people at the earliest possible point. So we will, as part of that, need to bring in some additional resource to support with that work as we test and learn, and as we look at those new ways of indications around our new operating model, which is really important for us as a service, because it's really about looking at that longer term model rather than just that reactive, as Michelle mentioned, that kind of having to react and be really responsive, and actually getting upstream a lot more. So we will be looking at targeted areas in terms of that transformation, where we will need some additional capacity in order to see, you know, what that does for us and how that new operating model works.
Thank you. Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. I think what Michelle focused on as well was the number of 12-week reviews, and that they're all completed on time. And that's really important, because the flavour of some of the questions this evening has been around, are people getting more care than they need? And that's a valid and important question. So that 12-week review is critical to make sure that the ongoing long-term care package is at the lowest potentially safe level to meet those needs. So all those being on time is a real positive, and credit to the service actually to get those done, because the service is very fluid. It's very fast. There's a lot of turnover in adult social care on the number of people coming through.
The table chart on page 7, and that shows that there is a majority, there's no change in their long-term support, but as the others together, it means that it's only about half that don't change, and there's change in half the people's circumstances after review, and it shows how important rapid reviews are, and the need to make sure that everybody's getting them as they require them. What I'm a bit of a loss about is who's involved in these reviews. And I wonder if someone could, I mean, say I start suffering from Parkinson's very badly and need care. What processes would I go through, and who would process my case to arrive at some sort of determination of what care I require? Just, you know, in practice, we perhaps need to have more idea about what's involved in these reviews in actual reality. And I'd like to come back on another question.
Okay. So when we review individuals, we'll ensure that obviously they're at the centre of the review, but involved will be a family member, a carer. We will also involve, if there's any other agencies such as their GP, district nurses, if there's a Parkinson's nurse, for example, we'll invite them to the review. So as many people as the individual wants involved, but we also feel is important to involve, so that we're doing that holistic review of the client. And we'll always ensure that that individual's voice is heard throughout the review where possible. If they're not able to make decisions around their care and support needs, we will consider whether or not a best interest decision is needed about the type of support they need following the review, if there's any changes identified, and we'll explore all options to meet needs rather than just continue with what's already in place.
So once that review started, how long will it take to complete, and how many people might be involved in it on average?
It depends on individuals. Sometimes the review can just be done with them. If their circle around them is quite small, sometimes it can involve. Generally, a review will be held in person, either in the individual's home or in a care home, and people will be invited to attend. So the review itself could happen quite quickly. Some other times it might be that we need to reach out and gather that information separately and bring it together into the final review report. So it is very individual basis.
Let's just ask, who carries out those reviews then?
Okay, so social care practitioners or qualified social workers. It could be a senior social worker, depending on the complexity of the client and the level of needs that they've got.
Yeah, in the next report that we're going to look at, the children's one, there's some very useful benchmarking data setting out our performance in Shropshire against other similar authorities. I couldn't see any benchmarking data in this. Do you actually benchmark yourself against a family of authorities or not? And if so, where are we faring, as it were, in that, not league table, but you know what I mean?
Natalie, did you want to come in on that point?
Natalie, come in.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really good question. So we used to do that a lot with ASCOF. We've now moved from ASCOF to client level data. So it's still early days within that, but within the region, the West Midlands ADAS hub is collecting the data now, where we'll be able to start feeding some of that through. Because of client level data being new and a significant shift, ASCOF had been around for a while. We'll be able to start introducing that a lot more to our reports. So it's a really good indicator, actually. What we want to do as a region going forward within the sector is to be able to have that wider national perspective on client level data. And we know here in Shropshire that, you know, we're really interested in data comparisons with our statistical neighbours, sometimes regionally. It's not always comparable, but it is a start that we will be able to do that. So I was at an event today and they were talking about how we make the steps to start utilising that regional data for things like scrutiny, and actually thinking about that continuous improvement as a service and how we do that. So it is coming, but it's just been that shift from ASCOF to client level data.
Thank you.
If we can have a special agenda item looking at that data as soon as it's available, looking at things like spend and outcomes and things like things.
I think it's a really valid point as well. Like with the CLA, which, like as you've mentioned, in a year's time we can use that data then to see how we've actually done improvements. So coming back to the referral speeds and everything else, if we got data from this year and it's compared with other authorities as well, in 12 months' time, this committee can come back and do a comparative study to then look at whether the referrals are going up or down and the level of care is changing as well. So I think that'd be quite a useful report to have.
I think I've heard a lot since I've been in the last 12 months since I was elected as a councillor. I hear lots about plans and strategies and all these kind of things. What I don't hear a lot of is actions. And I think that a scrutiny committee is there to look at what is happening and what could be done better, what could be changed, whatever. Some of these reports, I mean, I've complimented on the reports before. We've always had so much information, really, really interesting. But some of them here, the sort of statements are made without anything to qualify them at all. And I think that I would certainly find it useful to have some sort of what used to be called a RAG rating system, you know, red, amber, green. And we have a table given to us that says, looked after children, you know, what the figures are, number of reviews that are outstanding, 30%, 29%, you know, so that we know that if that number of reviews is constantly red, we've got to do something about it. And we as members would need to press others in the council to do something about that. I can't get a sense from any of these documents and tables that we've got a sort of overarching picture of what we're doing really well and what we're not keeping up with quite so well across the whole services. And the data's there, it's just a case of pulling it out in a way that we can understand. When we've got a lot of new councillors elected, probably half of them are new, and we don't know any of this. And actually I think that's quite a good thing, because we're asking what probably sound like stupid questions because we don't know what these things mean. Like I just asked David what was strength-based conversations were. I had no idea what a strength-based conversation is. David's explained it to me now, but that isn't a phrase I would have used to describe that thing. And I think we've got a lot of jargon going around here which can hide stuff sometimes. And I think we should be looking at having some sort of fairly concise table of key things that we as a scrutiny committee need to ensure are happening, and where they're not, that we can then say, we think this needs to be addressed. I don't know how others feel.
David, is it worth mentioning about the news?
Well,
I think we've discussed this already.
Just about to say, actually, so I think in terms of the plans moving forward, I think absolutely right. We've talked about having a key range of consistent indicators that would allow exactly that discussion and comparison to take place. That will also align with, certainly from a children's perspective, the national indicators that are used. So the local government outcomes framework is a consistent benchmarking tool across all local authorities that would allow you and other members to see exactly what's there. So that links into the national social care framework, similarly for adults and a wider range. So we can, with the plan with agreement from the chairs is that we will explore a range of those indicators in preparation for July, the meeting. So it might be worth, Chair, we pull those together and circulate those to overview committee members for their awareness, and then we will help to do that, and then we'll provide an update on in that July meeting. From our perspective in children, and I think it would be the same for adults, but I'll let Natalie comment on that. We're really keen to do that so that committee members have a real consistency when we receive challenge and inspection from Ofsted or CQC, and we're obviously in a thematic visit window currently. So I think that will be really helpful both for members but also for officers to ensure we've got consistency around the scrutiny and challenge that we would expect from members.
Thank you. It's having that relative data as well, isn't it? So we can see what we're actually looking at in Shropshire, how we're doing in Shropshire compared with everyone else, and year on year how we're actually doing. So we can actually measure ourselves. Natalie, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you. Yes, echo what David's saying. We're working with our data analysts at the moment to develop data in that aligns with our assessment framework in CQC. Because it is core business, it's what we do. So with that, when that's developed, you will start seeing that reported in a lot more in the scrutiny report. So it really will follow that consistent approach that I think has been highlighted. That along with the client level data, when we can start benchmarking, hopefully those two together will start getting that regular picture of, have we gone up, have we gone down, where do we sit in terms of that regional position. So it's just to say it's coming and it is in development, because we really need that as a service as well. It's not just about how we report it, it's really good in terms of driving that performance and helping us to really target our plans in the right area. And I think it helps them to sort of really focus on the analysis part of it and that interrogation part of it. So it is, just to say, it is in development for adults as well. We're a little bit behind the curve, but it is coming.
But having that comparative data is very important, because you can actually learn from the data from other authorities, and if other authorities are doing things in different ways, it's looking then at how they're actually doing it to implement it, to research that. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Ruth?
No, Natalie's answered. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Thank you.
Matter of interest, Chair, is there an inspection regime in the services, and how have we performed when we've been inspected? Because I can't recollect seeing lately.
There's the Care Quality Commission inspection. We were one of the very early ones, maybe 2 years ago now, and we were rated as good. So we are expecting another inspection anytime, and working towards that. Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for that. I think the report is definitely clearer in my view than I've seen in the past. I think the diagrams, it's been highlighted by different councillors. We can look into diagrams as well. I think that's been quite a useful pictorial way of looking at how we're doing. I think moving forward, looking at having that benchmarking data in the future, looking at having, as Councillor Husman's said, it's looking at even a RAG rating type sort of system. I don't know how feasible that's going to be. So at least we can see how we're compared with. And as Natalie's mentioned, having that system where we can actually compare ourselves, with the past, with the future, with other authorities as well. It puts everything into perspective as well. But thank you very much for all the time and effort in the report. And I know you wanted our report to be like a lot longer. So thank you for reducing it. So at least we could focus on those key areas of deferred payments and everything else. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to Item 7. So this is our performance report from Children's Services. David and Steve, that's on.
Thank you very much, Chair. Colleagues, you will see the report. I'll hand over to Sam to take you through in detail, but we've circulated several documents in advance to hopefully illustrate performance in the round. We've taken this as an end of year performance report, so it's really important from a children's perspective that people overviewing scrutiny do have that visibility, but also have the opportunity to challenge and scrutinise the performance data in children's services. That is absolutely a fundamental part of the inspection regime, the ILAC inspection and the wider EVISEND and JTI regimes that incorporate children's services. So I'm going to hand over to Sonia to step you through, and we'll welcome questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, and thank you. I hope that you've had a chance to look at the reports. I do appreciate there's a lot of information in there, but it is kind of aimed to give you that end of year kind of performance data. You'll be aware as members that you have a statutory duty to have that really kind of like wide breadth of knowledge around children's social care. It's not just a case of just looking at it in the context of council business. You do have that individual corporate parenting statutory responsibility as members. What I won't do is go through it in detail from my perspective. I'll raise a few highlights for you. There is a bit more of an in-depth kind of magnified look on the children's, looked after children's demand within the report. That was requested by committee, and obviously we've tried to answer the questions that were posed around children's demand. But just in terms of setting out a little bit of kind of context around this, we call it the chat. It's that complicated data report that was at the end, which does have some benchmarking in it. As an overall observation to offer you, we benchmark very well against the vast majority of our key performance indicators within that chat, and I'm happy to take any questions on any of those at all. There are a couple that we need to be, we're working on, and we kind of keep a very close eye on. We data check weekly, so the performance is scrutinised weekly, and it's picked up on and addressed sort of on a weekly basis. That enables us to sustain that level of good performance. So we're now 12 months into maintaining performance at the level that we're doing it. And obviously, you do see variations in performance, but they tend to be little variations around school holidays, times of annual leave, Christmas, etc. You see little dips, and then it kind of picks back up again. The key point I think that is most relevant in terms of this report is the downward trajectory of children's looked after numbers. So we're back at 111 children per 10,000 from a high of 121 per 10,000 in 23-24. And that was obviously 119 per 10,000 in 24-25. So we are seeing that downward trajectory over the last 3 years now. What I would also say is in the chat, it shows you that the rate of children that's starting to become looked after is 21 per 10,000, and that is well below the national average, which means we're performing higher than the national average and our stat neighbour averages. What you will also see there is that the CEASE level, which is at 32 children per 100,000, is well above the national average and the stat neighbour average. Combine those two together, and we're confident we will maintain that downward trajectory of the numbers of children becoming within our looked after system. Obviously, the duration of a child and how long they're in our system is unpredictable. Some children come in for a few months and then they exit because we end their care plans with adoption, for example. That's one of the quickest. And some come in for 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14 years. So, you know, that group in the middle is the hardest kind of number to shift. But keeping an eye on the numbers coming in and getting those low and exiting those numbers and getting as many out through permanence plans as possible is kind of where we want to be. We are keeping an eye on our 0 to 5s. You will see in the report that they remain a high area of need, and we are running at 16% of our total looked after children population against the national average of 12%. Care plans for 0 to 5s are progressed through the court, and that means that we have to evidence the threshold for very serious harm has been met, and the court is making the decision about the outcomes for those children. It's an indicator, I would suggest, that the system supporting families with children under the age of 5 is not yet as strong as it needs to be to enable those families to cope and manage. And what we see is that stress and unmet need in parents, particularly, popping up in the harm that's happening to our under 5s. It's been an area of work for quite some time, and the new Family First Partnership reforms is really aimed at targeting and meeting the needs of those families particularly, and really strengthening that offer of support. But obviously by the time those families get to the point whereby they're coming to children's social care, that harm has already happened. Obviously the report focuses then on the financial impact of some of this. So obviously the best outcome for any child is that they remain within their family, preferably their birth family, if we can work with them, with their birth parents, to make that safe. If not, their extended family. And if they can't live in either of those, then we try and find them an alternative family, either through adoption or foster care. There is a paper that's attached to that updated committee, again from last month's committee into this month's, on the foster recruitment and retention and provision, and that's kind of addressed in the paper. If you add up all of the children who are looked after but are in family-based placements, it averages around 70%, just above, usually between 70 and 80% of all of our children are in family homes of some type, whether it's their own or extended families. But we do have that additional challenge of residential homes being a very high number for us at this moment in time. We've seen a real shift in recent years, the recent 12 to 18 months really, where we're struggling to find foster homes for younger complex children. So children are getting more complex younger, and we're having to place younger children into residential homes, sometimes as young as 6 and 7 and 8, which obviously we don't want to do. That's been a growing area. We currently have around 120 children, it goes up and down on a daily basis, in sort of residential homes of some sort. We have 5 of our own provision, all of which are graded outstanding or good. That's a short breaks home and 4 other homes, one of which is sort of more of a short to medium term, where we know we're going to be able to work with that family. We just need to do the work with the parents and the child, bring them back together, and they're able to step down again. 2 that are 2-bed therapeutic homes, 1 that is for children under the age of 12 with a view to getting them home to either their family or to foster care, and a sort of 16 plus provision where we support children to sort of like start that independence journey in a very safe, homely environment. The report details a little bit about Stepping Stones, which is our family support service, and it offers a systemically informed therapeutic approach to parenting and to children within families, and often working with the extended families as well. And it enables families to work through the issues that they face. It has 3 main purposes: to avoid children becoming looked after in the first place, to step down from residential home to either foster homes or to their family home, or to step down from foster care to the family home. Page 33 on the pack it tells you the numbers of those children in each of those categories that we've done over the recent years. You'll notice that one of the performance indicators is that we track is children out of county and where they live out of county. Now, Telford and Wrekin is technically called out of county, but for many children that's actually closer to their family homes than they would be if they were living in other parts of Shropshire. We have currently 306 children at the end of March living out of county. 184 of those are living within family-based settings, so that quite most of those are living maybe with grandparents that might be living in Wales, for example, or with aunts and uncles, or with extended family, or with foster families, or that sometimes children are adopted. So our adoption agency is T4C, so we are able to locate adopters that live in Stoke, Staffordshire, Telford and Wrekin and Shropshire through our adoption arrangements with T4C. You will also see that 5% of the children that are in residential care have complex disability needs, and they are some of our most costly but also most long-term. Once a child with complex needs disability needs becomes looked after in a residential home, the chances are they're not going to be in a position to return to a family setting. The reason that they've become into that residential setting is that they're not able to have their needs adequately met within a family setting. So the actions that we're taking to mitigate the pressures at the moment, because obviously there are those key financial pressures around the residential settings, is to really try and work with our commissioning colleagues. We now have commissioning services for children's social care. They've been working with us for just over sort of 12 months and really taking a very focused commissioning approach to really trying to look at the market and the complexities within the market. There are national challenges to both residential care and foster care, but there are also local challenges. So there are currently over 400 children living within Shropshire in private provision, whether that be private foster homes or private residential homes, who are not Shropshire children. They're from all over the rest of the country. That leaves us with quite a challenge to find our children homes locally within Shropshire, because a lot of our local beds are filled with other children from across the county. So there's a lot of work going on through commissioning. We do have a contract with a provider, and we've just moved that from 10 beds to 15 beds to try and guarantee those more locally based beds for some of our children. But most of the providers don't want to do that, because what they want to do is be in that competitive market and be able to have that flexibility around what they charge. Care planning for children who have experienced very serious harm and trauma, it's complex, takes time, and has to be driven by the child's needs and the child's timescales. So quite often we will do quite a lot of trajectory work in relation to, we think this number of children are going to step down in the next quarter, and then there's quite often a lot of slippage around that, which is why in the budget reports you will quite often see some movement one way or the other, and it's just that for some reason that child's either not ready, the therapy's not concluded yet, or the parents are having a bit of a wobble and we're having to kind of like support them. You know, all of those kind of things come into effect, but we do try and project, but it's not an exact science, as you can imagine. We have to take a whole system approach to care planning. So the role of education in terms of school and how children's needs are met through their education provision, how their needs are met through their health provision, and then how we meet their social care needs within their family, all has to kind of come together at the right time. We're doing a lot of work to really strengthen the way in which we do that. So at the moment, a child could have a decision made about their school within their EHCP and the SEND team. Health could make a decision about how their health needs are being met, and we'd decide, well, actually, that child can't live there now. They've got to go and live in Telford and Wrekin, or go and live in Staffordshire. And actually, then those three things don't necessarily follow the child in a very coordinated way. So what we're doing is really strengthening what we call the kind of decision making, and having that kind of panel come together to really pull those three aspects of that decision making together into one space, rather than having sort of different decisions happening about the child at different times. We're also working on the foster care sufficiency, the recruitment and retention, and the paper that's attached, the appendix, describes that in terms of the national context and challenge. But with this, in the last 2 years, we've bucked the national challenge, the national context, and we've recruited significantly more foster carers, and we've retained really well as well. We've set ourselves a very aspirational target for 26-27. We want to recruit 30 sets of new foster carers, which is nearly double what we've done in the last 2 years. So we're really aiming high in relation to that. We are focusing on really good quality, well-supported returns to family at the right time. This gets you the best outcome for the child and the family, but it also gets you the most cost-effective outcome. If we rush it and we step a child down and they come back in to become looked after, they usually come in more traumatized again, more rejected, to a higher cost provision, and you never get them back out again. So we do ask for kind of like that kind of understanding of patience, that sometimes an extra few months is more cost effective than rushing it and then kind of coming back through. The foster care transformation is going to be really embedded and progressed this year. How will happened last year? You're aware of that as a scrutiny committee. And what we're really focusing in on is using the new hub that we've been given from Stepping Stones around how do we support those foster placements in terms of placement stability right from the early stages. So what we tend to do is wait until they kind of start to wobble and then we put support in. Well, actually, why do we wait for them to wobble? Let's put support in right at the beginning, really build the confidence of those carers, build those relationships with the child, and hopefully then when they do wobble, the wobbles aren't quite as extreme as they can be. I haven't got anything else to add. I hope I've kind of run you through an awful lot of information very quickly. I'm really happy to take questions.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for all the work you and your team are doing for the children of Shropshire. There's an awful lot of positive things in that report. You know, I think recruiting more foster carers, you're very aspirational targets. I've been on a different board, and I think that I know Councillor Hortons has been promoting that as well. We've been doing it on social media as well, trying as many foster carers as we can, especially with that strengthening the decision making around each child. I think is commendable. So you've identified that we need to have a more coordinated approach when looking at the needs of the child. So I think that's really good. And thank you. You've mentioned CLA numbers have declined. Obviously, how confident next year? Are we projecting next year where they're going to be next year? What's up?
Start to plateau out. I am very confident that we are going to see that trajectory continue. So we've had that trajectory now for 3 years. There's no reason why that would significantly change. We're so far below, as in performing well in terms of children coming in at the moment. And with the Family First Partnership coming in, it can only strengthen that, particularly around the 0 to 5s. So that's where we're really going to focus a lot of the first phase of the development of Families First Partnership, is making sure that we are reaching the families that need that help and support at the earliest opportunity. We have that number of those families where for some reason they're still not getting that early help at the earliest opportunity. And my principal social worker is currently undertaking an audit of the last 50 children under the age of 12 to come into care let's see if we can unpick what that's about. So why are those families not being seen and picked up around those early help services? Can we kind of get underneath that? Or if they have had the help, why hasn't it worked? So that's a real kind of like area of focus. But the trend, the data is telling us, Councillor Davies, sorry, that we are seeing less children coming in because we've strengthened our early help offer. And we've got good partnership working. We need to do more, and Family First Partnership will help us do that. We're doing the right things to get them out. Our care proceedings is really strengthened. Our timeliness in care proceedings is strengthened. That permanence planning to complete those care plans is really strengthened. So we're seeing children exit and we're stepping them down and out where possible. There's no reason why those two trajectories would suddenly change. I guess the other point to make is, at what point do we accept that we've got the right number of children in care for Shropshire? And I think that's a really difficult one to say, well, actually, but this is where we think that we probably are, and this is where we're going to kind of like sit. And I think that the level of harm that we see, I think, is quite shocking. Sometimes it takes my breath away sometimes. And I think that we underestimate it because we see ourselves as a very nice county with nice people that live in it. And I think that when I talk to you about, the children that are going to court proceedings, we're not talking about dirty carpets and, parents that aren't doing a very good job. We're talking about children that have been really, really quite seriously hurt. And I think there is going to be a system challenge around how we meet the needs of parents, because a lot of that is quite often around mental health, domestic abuse, housing, substance abuse, etc. Those kind of complex needs in parents. And I think that the system is not yet in a space where we're addressing that as well. And housing is coming out on our needs and harms analysis as quite a significant issue. And we're going to be picking that up in the Families First development.
The reason I asked that, if if numbers were to drop rapidly, then the question is reversed, isn't it?
Yes.
Are we not identifying the needs of those children? Because, you know,
Exactly
as needs are escalated, we know that.
Yeah.
Much of them coming in as well. So it's getting that balance. We're not expecting, it's a large drop. That's not such a good thing either, is it? It's about meeting the needs of the children and getting those early measures in which you were doing at the start.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sonia, for a very comprehensive presentation of that report. What I would like to say is that, you know, we should be curious if numbers suddenly drop. That's absolutely right. It's the right question to ask, because we know from our Ofsted inspection and our LGA reviews that our thresholds are right and the right children are in care. So as Sonia has explained, it's really critical to address the drivers with parents that need extra support. So drug and alcohol is a big issue. Domestic abuse is a big issue. So Council next month, there will be a domestic abuse strategy, which is through the Safeguarding Partnership, and that will address, we hope, some of those issues and protect children more in those family arrangements. The foster family target is stretching, and that's great, and we know the outcomes are better. The extra time Sonia mentioned about, you know, making sure that the next move for a child out of residential care is right is really important, because we don't want a revolving door. The costs just escalate, and we know that. So the work that's going on is complex. It's very complex. There's lots of things happening, not least the government sending new directives every 2 or 3 weeks and changes and everything else. I'm not being political, Alan. It's just coming through fast, you know, very fast. So in June, Cabinet, there will be all the transformation plans, which are very comprehensive, and they are focusing on that early help and stepping stones. And, you know, that's, if you want to look at another paper about children's services, that's the one to look out for in June Cabinet papers.
Sure, thank you. Any questions?
I've a couple. I've got an extra one there. Thank you very much. A really good report, and for explaining it as well. Just the last thing that you said there, it just occurred to me that, as you're aware, we've got a lot of new houses being built around Shropshire. You know, we've got to do 2,000 houses a year now. That's potentially a lot of new children suddenly coming in, and I don't know how much you anticipate that really, whether you sort of built that in, that, you know, more children will inevitably, some of them will fall into those categories. One of the other things as well was about, we've obviously got a lot of children who are out of county, as you said, and that's partly because we don't have sufficient children's homes here. Going back to the funding side of it, when I was at a meeting last week, our SIL fund has something like £26 million in it, which is horrifying to hear, because it's sitting there not working and doing what SIL is designed for, which is community infrastructure levy. It's designed for the community, and at the moment it's gathering interest, which is going into the revenue fund, but it's not working for us, and it's devaluing really with inflation. And I just wonder whether you've considered approaching the SIL fund for some money to build a children's home or renovate some buildings into children's homes.
So we have 5 of our. We started to look at a transformation project to see whether or not we would be in a position to expand those. And we face a little bit of a challenge, because whilst there are so many private homes in Shropshire, they actually exhaust the staffing and the sort of the employment people that are in that space. So the reason we've stopped at 5 at the moment is that we've actually you know, had real challenges this year in terms of staffing, and is to sort of stabilise the staffing in our own homes and to maintain that kind of quality of care. When you're running children's homes, you kind of hit a sort of maximum where adding one then destabilises the rest. You kind of almost have to do a group and then cost effectiveness do another group, because you hit a tipping point whereby your management structure isn't enough, but then it's not cost effective to have a new management structure over, say, just one home, for example. So I would say at the moment we are at our capacity. We need to work with the market. It's not that we haven't got enough homes in Shropshire, it's that it's not Shropshire children in Shropshire homes. So those 400 beds that I talked to you about have got children from all over London, all over the West Midlands, all over the, literally all over the country. They cause some real challenges for our partners, police and health particularly, because obviously they don't necessarily bring funding, but they bring their own complexities with them as well. So I would say to you, I would really like us to, because we do children's homes really well. Our children tell us we create loving homes that they are happy in and they do well in, and we know that that happens. And Ofsted tell us that through the gradings as well. I'd love to say, let's have another 5, but unless we can have that influence on the market to be able to have the right staff come and become the caregivers to those children in a very consistent way, we risk destabilising our own homes if we do that too fast, too quickly, if you get what I mean. So the first step is working with those local providers. So like the one that we've got a really good working relationship with, we've just recommissioned them. We've gone from 10 beds to 15, so we can give another 5 children that sort of stability. So we did look at a transformation programme and a growth programme. It's on hold at the moment. That's not to say it's off the table, but we need to make sure we're in the right position to do that. And you've done,
Well, just responding directly to your SIL question.
Yeah.
So that's something, again, we are considering in terms of not rebuilding, but whether we could apply that in terms of repair, proactive maintenance, that type of thing. We already do apply that to the education and SEND developments, both in terms of capital, new build developments, but also maintenance. So we have that approach.
Good to hear. I mean, with your fostering report, which I think is excellent, and the marketing is fantastic. I mean, I think other teams in your division could learn a lot from it, and other teams in the council could learn a lot from it. So you've achieved a lot in raising the profile of becoming a foster person. Could you not adopt a similar strategy for raising the profile of wanting carers, people to work in the care sector?
We have, yeah. We've had a very strong recruitment strategy, and we have successfully done that. But because it's such a competitive market, they move very easily. They get promoted very easily. And what we need is the stability within that. So I would say to you, it's not off the table, but we really needed to do that work around stabilising our own homes first, because what makes our homes outstanding is that we have really stable staff teams, and they build really long-lasting relationships with those children. Even long after those children have left, those care teams are in touch with those children. We've had staff go to somebody's wedding this summer. There are long-lasting relationships, and they really commit to the children, and that's what makes them so successful, really, and so positive. So it's a complicated one, and I'd love to have another 5 or 6 homes, because when people join us and we say to them, go and see the homes, they say, gosh, these are amazing. People come and visit and say, we need to replicate this, nationally. What we're doing in terms of making those homes feel like homes, and children saying, I live here, this is my home, I'm proud of it, I'm loved by these people that care for me. You've got to really pick the right people to do that. It's not a job to our residential care workers. It is a vocation, and they do it with love. So not everybody that works in residential care is in that space either.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And perhaps a comment, you've identified a real challenge around the recruitment with your question, and that applies across adult social care services as well. There's a very competitive market for carers, and there's an extreme shortage of carers, actually, so it's very difficult to find reliable and responsive and care staff that are there with the right attitude, and that's important across the whole care sector. So it is a pressure across residential and nursing provision in adult social care as well as children's, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is really yet.
Well, just diversing a little, we'll be looking at youth transformation strategies and keeping young people in Shropshire. Isn't this a wonderful opportunity to promote such services in the colleges? These are the sort of qualifications you're going to have in care. These are the opportunities we give to young people in Shropshire, and actually look then, David, at that different level of going into the colleges and promoting the care sort of courses young people can do, with a view of keeping them in Shropshire as well.
So I
It's
think
looking at it from the grassroots level, isn't it?
No, 100%. And I think, again, whilst we will always continue to explore whether we can expand that further, we apply that approach to our residential homes, to our apprenticeship levy, and also in terms of our social work practitioners as well. So, again, we've got 2 programmes that operate in that space. Again, we'll always explore what else we can do. I'm over at the college on Friday, so I'll have those conversations around what more we can do. We're similarly trying to apply, as Councillor Holton said, across the system, where we might engage with universities and other larger providers in terms of that type of approach across all roles in children and adults, actually, from education psychologists to care workers. It's really, really difficult. And I think, again, that sits within a national context of actually you can go and work in Aldi or a supermarket for a very similar level, if not more, than the per hour amount. And the work is very, very different. You know, it's difficult to leave mentally the care service work at the door and go home and pick up all your normal family things, where it's quite easy to do that in a retail environment. So I think we're in that position where that there isn't a balance at the minute. So again, the more we can do and continue to do in this space. So we have got, it's all about the care website. We can circulate to POSC members some of the wonderful adverts that we've done. We've taken it to the level of providing video clips, providing direct quotes from young people about just some of the heartwarming things they've said about their care workers, whether they are residential workers, social workers, practitioners. I mean, some of the comments literally bring tears to your eyes. So I think we will circulate some of those actually to people overview committee members, actually, just to bring this to life for you. But again, if you have any thoughts, areas we can develop further, please do let us know.
Thank you. That's lovely.
Yeah, it's obviously interesting report, and there's some good news in there, but I can't stop returning to the graph that's on page 10 in this report. I mean, we heard from Ruth that the categorisation or classification that's exercised in Shropshire is correct in terms of designating looked after children. So there must be something wrong in the basis of the society and other institutions in which we live. And I'm sure this has been looked at before, but to see Shropshire on that table at the top and just about levelling off, as we've heard, but still at the top, and to look at the other councils that you wouldn't think were that much better off than much of Shropshire, you've got to ask, what's wrong with this damn place that's resulting in these sorts of findings?
Very good question.
Okay, thank you for your question. And yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you'll notice in the timeline, it was at the start of COVID that we really started to see a very, very sharp increase.
Everybody had COVID.
Yeah, can I continue?
Yeah,
so, and that's where we saw the start, the really increase. There were 5 main categories of reasons. We did a lot of analysis work. We did a lot of audit work around that. At the time of COVID, we had very few unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and young people. We didn't take them from the National Transfer Scheme. We only took those that arrived locally, either through being dropped off at like the local service stations or whatever. So right at the beginning of COVID, we became part of the National Transfer Scheme. So we automatically then, I think we had an additional 50 in the first year. And so that was that was 1/5 of the kind of like analysis that we did. The support services for Shropshire were not available to families. So the community services, those working in the communities, health visitors, community health, etc., were all pulled into the hospitals. If you lived in Walsall or Wolverhampton, all of your children's centres remained open and they were able to offer those help and support. So we saw a huge increase in 0 to 5s, and that 0 to 5 increase has not really ever come back down. We then had the complexity of the court system and the court system right across our footprint, which is ourselves, Telford, Wrekin, Walsall, Wolverhampton, Sandwell and Dudley. That's our court footprint. saw huge delays in the court system. So we had a large number of 0 to 5 children coming in, for example, and then they were delayed in the court system. Some of them were delayed for nearly 3 years, and it took a long time for that system to recover. So you then had children who were then stuck in that court system. You then had children who we would have stepped down out of care, and would have been able to support them to go home, but there were no services available for that 3 years for them because they just weren't there to, to enable that to happen. And then we had a huge number of non-accidental injuries and significant harm to children of all ages during COVID as well, particularly those that were living in family homes. And the last area that we did a lot of analysis around was large family groups. So in Shropshire, you wouldn't know it, but we have a significantly higher proportion of families with 4+ children than the national census level. And I think in 2 years, we brought in at something like 12 families with 6+ children in those. So that really affected our numbers as well. So we really understand why there was a huge increase. We did a lot of detailed analysis, and that's why we're confident that those children were the right children to come into care at that time. Had we have had a different response in terms of our system services, that may have been different. But we also then had the lack of early help, and we went through an early help transformation right in the middle of COVID as well. So we identified challenges in the early help space in 21-22, and we did a transformation 23 into 24, and we're now seeing the impact of that transformation. So across those kind of 5 areas, I can give you the detailed data breakdown of exactly how many children were in each of those. We did do a report to the previous Scrutiny Committee at the time in relation to that. So that is in the archives, but I'm happy to kind of have that conversation again if anybody, wants that information.
Could we have that in a note, please? The experts.
Anyone else?
Actually, have that information generally about the large families, because I've heard that verbally from somebody else, but I've not seen it, I don't think, anywhere.
Yeah, I've got the data somewhere. I've got our census number, and I don't want to give it to you off the top of my head because if I remember it wrong, I think, but our census was slightly higher. Yeah.
Have you got any plans about how people to be pointed to the crisis resilience fund?
Am I right in saying that the crisis resilience fund isn't just for people on benefits? Yeah. So there may be people who are not on benefits, who are in that little in between bit. How are we going to make sure that they know about and can access this fund so that they then don't become these families that we're having to bring in, and they're under huge stress from all sorts of things, and things break down at home, whatever. Have we got a plan for making sure that people really understand that that fund is there for them and what it can be used for? Because I'm not sure that message has gone out as clearly as perhaps it should to people. So we've done a lot of work on that alongside housing colleagues. It's accessed very easily through our early help eHAST team at the front door. So one of the first things that the conversations that they have is part of the challenge that families are having. Is it a financial challenge, etc.? So it's very easily, we are apportioned a pot of it ourselves, and we can access it for families very easily. It's advertised through our sort of early help newsletters. It's advertised through schools. The early help newsletters go out through that, nurseries, early year settings, etc. So we do try and kind of make it as widely known as possible. It's not only accessed through us. There are other ways of accessing it through housing. It's widely available within the kind of the council, and has a number of points whereby it can be distributed, you know, out to families. But what we do is focus on making sure the staff know that it's available and how to access it in a really straightforward way.
Yeah, because at the moment, those who are in the loop and get newsletters will see it, but those who aren't yet in the loop, which is what
the early help newsletter goes out. A lot of it goes out on the Facebook pages, etc. There's quite a detailed kind of communication around it. I would suggest that our challenge is families wanting it. There's a lot of pride and a lot of, you know, pride is a barrier for, you know, for families, isn't there? Quite often, and it's a real shame.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Sonia, thank you for the report. It's not just that you've got a lot of data, which is very useful, but you've clearly analysed a lot of that data, and you've got a lot of, when we asked, a lot of questions were resolved by your presentation in the first place. And as the questions come in, you've clearly considered all the items, and just credit to you for doing that, because that's not always a given. Having said that, you'd expect there to always be a few questions, which I'm just pondering over. The first is, yeah, the decline in the number of foster placements is a concern, to be honest, and you've explained why and explained what you're doing about that. But actually, if we've got hundreds of families in Shropshire offering foster placements to kids from outside, that's a potential win, isn't it? Actually, it's not as though we haven't got people offering foster placements. They're just choosing to offer it to other agencies at the moment, and we really need to think about, well, what is driving them to do that, and how can we make our offer more attractive, because they are actually there. And that's an easier thing than trying to start from scratch with a new family becoming a foster care, it seems to me. So just to encourage you along that route. Secondly, you mentioned housing as an emerging issue. And I probably need to tell me more about this. Is private rented stock has not been maintained? Is it overcrowding? Is it our own stock? What is it? Is it homelessness? I don't know. What is it about housing that is causing this concern? And then it's picking up on Alan's point, because we have to be concerned that for several years we've had significantly higher numbers of children in care than any council in our neighbourhood group. So it's not Wolverhampton and Walsall we're comparing ourselves with, it's councils with similar rural councils like us. And you, on page 12 of your chat, you've got the CLA started, Children Looked After, started in the last 6 months. And yet it was stable up till last year, 35. And then the only figure you've got is the last 6 months, it's dropped quite significantly to 21. I don't know if that's the very latest data you've got, because that's the only data you've got for 25, 26. So it's a bit hard to build a big case on one data point, isn't it? Because there might be something unusual going on there. But if that is for modelling purpose, where the new rates of CLA are starting, you've got the rate of CLA ceasing, you should be able to model how many kids we will have in care if that is an accurate data point in 3, 4, 5 years' time. And it'd just be interesting to see that, because it would show us how quickly that curve will start to come down to the middle of the family group, rather than being an outlier as it is at the moment. Have you got this? Page 12 on the chat. I don't know what page it is in the report. Goodness knows. I mean, lots of page numbers here. So it's page 12 in the chat, and it says rate of CLA starting, but it's been level up to 24, 25, and then it's just one data point, last 6 months, 21. And I don't, it's just a bit.
So if I take the modelling question,
okay.
Councillor Kerr, first of all, so that is exactly the work that we're doing. So the report that Councillor Houghton mentioned earlier, that is what will come through to Cabinet in June. So we're currently undertaking exactly that exercise: entry this amount, exit this amount, overall demography, what the points look like, what does it look over 3 years. It will never be perfect, because models aren't, but it would give us a direction of travel. And again, we are equally interested in terms of that, as you can imagine our finance colleagues are. So we're having that exact conversation between performance and finance colleagues. I chaired a meeting only 2 days ago on exactly that point. So we're underway with that, and we look forward to bringing that back to people overview. And as you say, we are looking at what would the midpoint be between where we are in our rate now, 111, with where we started, for example, if you go back to 2020, 2021, which is around 80, 85, 86. Getting to that point, what's the timeline for that? So again, what would the financial implications be around that? Because as you're well aware, you can look at the numbers of children, you can then look at the numbers of caseloads, then you can look at the numbers of social workers, vacancies, etc. So that's the exercise underway. And all of that ties back to the wider reforms work that we're doing. So from that perspective, we're absolutely onto that. It's taken longer than we wanted it to, I think, in terms of the wider capacity challenges within the council around some of those enabling services. But we've spotted that. That's part of the transformation ask that Councillor Houghton is well aware of, that we've made corporately to the council as part of that transformation fund that we've got, because this is about children's services reusing our funding and our money within the year, but also drawing down additional resource for the corporate services to make sure we've got that pace that we all want to see. So we can do that work that Sonia's described really, really well, safely, in the right timescale, but we need those corporate enabling services to do that. I'll hand to Sonia for the questions around the data point. I think it's more than just an isolated one. I think we're seeing this now as a result of the wider work we're seeing. So we're not saying it's finished by any stretch, but it's much more embedded than it's ever been. We're having conversations in a much better way than we ever have, but we've still got much more work to do, and we will be bringing back in the next couple of months the updated threshold document that will need to go live at the end of June. And again, that will set out a much clearer, rather than a threshold to get into children's social care, the pathways and expectations around support that we will all expect as statutory partners, health, local authority, police, for all partners to engage in before you need to get anywhere near a child experiencing significant harm. That's what we all want, isn't it? Because that's a good outcome for children and young people. Sonia, I'll hand to you in terms of those other questions.
Having the opportunity to have the commissioning conversations with those providers and really trying to talk to them around. So we're doing a lot of work around sharing profiles with children who need long-term homes, saying to them, how can we work with you? This is our offer, how we can support you. And that comes back to that point that I made. We don't differentiate between an independent fostering agency and our own foster carers when we talk about the support for stability and that early support going in. If that foster family have got a child who's got those complex needs, we'll put that support in to that foster home, you know, at that earliest opportunity to try and create that stability for that child at that earliest opportunity. So that, I think it's the work in that kind of provider relationship space that we've not been able to do previously, but we're actually really focused in on at the moment. In terms of housing, I think it's an emerging issue. I think it's come out of the needs and harms analysis. So you'll be aware that we took, Natasha mentioned that when she was here in a previous committee meeting. And I think that will come back up again in the report that she brings next month, because sort of domestic abuse be the highest kind of need, etc., that's coming out across the complex data analysis that I'm not going to even attempt to explain to you. But actually housing's come up really quite significantly across all of the areas in terms of the hubs. So the analysis of what that means in terms of what type of housing issue is kind of underway in relation to that. I think your point around it's a point in time. So so take the graph that says we've had 62 children looked after start in the last 6 months, which is 21 children per 10,000. That's a 6-month measure. So it's not a point in time measure. We obviously have the data for the 25-26, but because this format is pulled through from our data into, this is a DFE format where the Stat Neighbours and the England averages are already pre-populated, because the 25-26 data isn't published till November of this year. That doesn't pull through, but we know that our figure for 24-25 that will be on there will be sort of like midway between the 34 and the 21, and it just showed that kind of trajectory across time. But you are absolutely right, and you know, if I had two families of 8 children come into care next week, then it'll swing completely back the other way, you know, and that is the volatility of kind of what we do. But I guess from my perspective, it's making sure that all of those systems that work in a very complex way, the court system, our own internal systems, the partnership system, working with the police, health, education, etc., is working at the most efficient that it can to meet the needs of those children as soon as possible, so that we can get that work done to get them back into a family setting wherever possible.
Thank you. Councillor Wharton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, the crisis fund was approved at Cabinet last week, and in that there's a spreadsheet that says how the money will be spent. And what's really encouraging is to see an allocation of funds, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, around supporting care leavers with budgeting, tenancy arrangements, preparing for living independently. And I think that's a really important step forward, because we're focusing on children looked after, but when they leave our care, they still need to be prepared for adulthood. And then secondly, one of the things I do want to say is that we are the second lowest authority investing in stepping stones and prevention. And in our transformation plans, we'll be shifting that so that we hope that there's much more early intervention and early help. And in communities, we need people to do that stuff, you know, libraries, stay and play, toddlers, mums, parents and toddler groups, all that stuff that helps those children early years. And we have had an early year service close quite suddenly in the south of the county, but actually supporting children in early years is really critical, and communities can do that. And it takes all of us, volunteers and interested parents or whatever. Thank you.
Let's come back to you, Councillor Hall. Yeah, I agree entirely, because our 0 to 5s is quite a large number. And if we can put that with intervention, and just like you've said quite correctly, into those children from 0 to 5, over 100 children in care, which is, we know that's a real concern, isn't it? That you're fully aware of this, we know this, and it's looking at putting those interventions into children from birth, basically, and ensuring those provisions are there from the very, very start to give those children the best start in life. Because if they're in care from 0 to 5, what's going to happen from 6 onwards? And that's not a question, it's just a statement. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you very much for the report. It's absolutely fantastic. And if there's any information you'd like us to share on our social medias, just to let residents in our local area know some of the services you're providing, please do let us know. I appreciate this is a very difficult question, but would you say, do you have any information or any experience to suggest that families who have recently moved into Shropshire from neighbouring counties further have an increased chance of having children, especially 5 and under, who actually go into care? Is that something to suggest that effectively there are other counties where we're, in a sense, taking in those families, and where they haven't been detected, but haven't been found in their system, and it's only once they come into our county do we actually find out that they do have care needs?
I couldn't give you any data off the top of my head in relation to that. What I can do is talk to you anecdotally in that we are an importer of children on a child protection plan from local authorities to a certain extent. There are not huge numbers. I mean, I'm not suggesting that would change us from sort of like 600 children to 400 children or anything like that. But you do have families who move in order to try and not have intervention, and then obviously we then pick up that intervention. And it's an interesting question, actually, because I wonder if I asked the question, if my data team could actually tell me how many children where we've issued care proceedings have they actually moved into, and then we've ended up being the issue of care proceedings. I know that in the last year we've had at least 3 sets where we've issued care proceedings, and the outcome has been that the court has said that the previous authority should have issued, and they've given inherent jurisdiction back to them, and they've gone back to them even though we've done the initial. So there is something in that, but I don't think it would be huge numbers, but it's not 0.
Yeah, very good question. And it does raise it, as we've identified, our CLA is higher compared with other authorities. If we've got evidence, for these children are actually moving from other authorities into Shropshire, And then it shows then how effective the systems we are here in identifying those needs of the children and address them, whereby perhaps they haven't been addressed so well in the past. So it would put a different sort of perspective on it as well. Thank you.
Just to comment on that, some of our families have been moving out of Shropshire for the same reason. There are some people who think that by moving, they can evade surveillance, they can keep themselves under hidden. So it's just an issue. I'm not sure we're any worse off. Maybe we are. I don't know. I was going to ask about housing, though, because I think if there's an issue about housing, I think we need to look at it. Other than the fact, I don't know if it's in our scrutiny panel or whether it's in the tougher scrutiny panel. So I just like it to be on the agenda when you've done your review. And whether it's us or whether it's the other panel, but somebody needs to look into, well, what are we doing about that? Because the council is responsible for private sector housing, the council provides social housing, the council has influence over other social landlords and should be using all those channels to make sure housing is safe, not just for kids in care, but safe for families generally.
Yeah, very good point. It's looking at the relationship then, the children who are moving into care. Is it because of the actual physical structure of where they're living? Or other conditions? It's just having, yeah, very good points. Thank you. Any further questions?
Thanks, Chair. You said about large families, it's here, there's 30% shipped out to county. And looking at some of the graphs, that 15% of that is Telford, which to me is in Shropshire. So that's about 15% that's shipped out. But you said about large families, if there's 4 or 5 children that has to be taken into care, are they split up? Because to me, that doesn't help them if they've got complex needs.
So we try very hard not to. And I think that if there are children who are in fact sibling groups of say 2 or 3, we are able to try and keep them together. I have got 2, maybe 3 sibling groups that live together in residential children's homes together. We've actually taken the decision to keep them together, but the only way we can do that is in a residential children's home. Larger families are much more complex because each of those children will be in a different space, and you can quite often guarantee that some of them would be able to go to grandparents, some of them might go to aunt and uncle, and 1 or 2 might need to, come into say foster care or something. When you've got families that have got extended trauma, we have to look very carefully at whether those children need to be with their siblings or whether actually it's more harmful to them to actually be there. So we look very carefully at where are the sibling relationships and where are they protective and where are they positive. So sometimes you'll have an older child with a younger child, say in a sibling group of 8, where that older child has practically parented that child. Now you might say, well, they definitely need to be together. Well, that's fine if the older child can then learn not to be that child's parent, because actually we're adultifying them if we're not careful. Or whether or not actually they can't be together because actually it's such a codependent relationship that it's not going to do either of them any good. So what I would say to you is wherever possible we try, where it's in the children's best interests, we will try, and we will definitely kind of do that. We have got foster carers who have got 5 children living with them, and literally legally we can go over numbers for foster carers. So say if foster care is registered for 3 children, if it's a sibling group, then we can ask them to go over numbers, and that goes through panel and it's checked, etc. We try really hard not to. If it's a sibling group of 6, 7 or 8, the chances are you're going to be in a minimum of 2, if not 3 homes. But what we then do is work very closely with those that are caring for them to say, how do you bring those children together? And we've had a very, very successful adoption recently, whereby one child has been adopted, the other children are with extended family, but that extended family have now been part of that adopted family, and that adopted child's going to grow up knowing their brothers and sisters really very, very well. They'll have a different life journey, but they will still be part of that extended family.
Any further questions? Well, thank you very much indeed for, first of all, the openness and the honesty in that report. I think it's very condensed, it's very focused, but we've engaged, I think, very well in it. There's been lots of really sort of very pertinent questions from the members as well. I think we've explored an awful lot of those avenues, perhaps we wouldn't have done otherwise. So thank you very much for that. We'll now move on to our next item on the agenda. So this is the Shropshire Safeguarding Children's Partnership Annual Report. And I believe this is over to Lisa, who's on Teams.
That's correct, Chair. So we'll bring Lisa in. I'll just introduce Lisa. So Lisa is our interim business unit manager. So Lisa will just step through our report. I think we would certainly just outline at the start. This is obviously looking back to 24-25, and we are now in 26-27. So I just want to acknowledge that is quite an extended period of delay, and that's due to various challenges within the team structure. So I'm taking that to make sure that Lisa doesn't end up with that question, colleagues. So if you have some questions around that, please do direct them to me. I think it's really important to note that obviously whilst we're talking 24-25 in this report, we will be really clear to make sure that the 25-26 report, which is the financial year we've just come from, is completed and back to you all by September, and then published by September. So we'll be back in line with our statutory guidance. I want you to hear that from me as the Director of Children's Services rather than Lisa having to pick that up. So Lisa, that said, I'll hand over to you just to step through the report.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for having me. And apologies that I can't be with you this evening. So I am here to present the Children's Safeguarding Partnerships Annual Report for 24-25. And as David has already said, we do acknowledge that this report is coming late to yourselves, but provide you with some assurance that we will ensure that the 25-26 report is completed and published by September 2026 in accordance with working together. Some of what I'm going to present to you this evening has already been covered extensively by Sonia and her presentation in some aspects. So apologies if there is any recurrence there. So the annual report demonstrates how partners across Shropshire have worked together during 2024-25 in order to safeguard children and improve outcomes for families in line with their statutory responsibilities set out in Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023. There has been an update to Working Together, and that was in March of 2026 this year. So Shropshire remains predominantly a rural county with dispersed communities, which presented distinct challenges for access to services, professional oversight and early identification of need. While overall deprivation is low, there are pockets of significant deprivation, and rising demand for social care intervention was seen particularly in younger children aged 0 to 5, and those local factors continue to influence safeguarding risks and service pressures. During the year, the partnership significantly strengthened its governance. So a dedicated children's safeguarding partnership was established in July of 2024, replacing the previous tripartite strategic group, whilst continuing to work very closely with the Safeguarding Adult Board and Community Safeguarding Partnership. New lead and delegated safeguarding partner arrangements were embedded, with clearer accountability, improved scrutiny and strengthened leadership oversight, and that was supported by an independent scrutineer. The partnership made really strong progress in terms of implementing national safeguarding reforms, and this included revised governance, strengthening policies and procedures, and enhanced involvement of education partners across all levels of the system, and had a renewed focus on early help, prevention and family support. Significant effort went into aligning local practice with national expectations and preparing for the forthcoming Families First partnership reforms. We recognise that there is significant work to be done and are committed to making the changes that are required. A central achievement for the year was the transformation of early help services. So there was a county-wide model including community and family hubs, and that was implemented without any additional national funding. And this led to earlier support for families and a reduction in unnecessary escalation to statutory services. And that also improved experiences for parents and children. And evidence showed that there was a substantial increase in families accessing help early, and there was a higher parental satisfaction and a reduction in the proportion of children requiring social work intervention after early help involvement. The partnership commissioned an independent review, diagnostic review into repeated cases and themes into case reviews. And what that provided was a clear and honest assessment of strengths and weaknesses into how learning into serious safeguarding cases were identified and embedded. Whilst the review highlighted areas requiring improvement, which included delays in completing reviews and varying leadership challenges, decisive action has already been undertaken, and this included streamlining the review processes that we have, strengthening our quality assurance, and shifting towards themed reviews to better address recurring themes such as child neglect, exploitation, and sharing information. Sonia has already talked about the last 50 children looked after audits, and one of those that was undertaken during the 24-25 period identified that children were becoming looked after appropriately and that there was robust decision making and effective escalation when required. Challenges, however, did remain, and these included spikes in demand for Section 47 investigations during school holidays, high number of police referrals, and the complexity created by children being placed in residential care from other local authorities. And these issues, as we've already heard, some of those have continued, and they are being monitored through audits, dashboards, and partnership action plans. A programme of multi-agency safeguarding training was delivered across Shropshire, and there were more than 200 learning sessions held. And this was supported by a large and committed training pool from across statutory and voluntary organisations. Feedback from those sessions demonstrated confidence and awareness among professionals, and they provided some assurance that local safeguarding arrangements are being effectively and consistently embedded across the workforce. However, we are clear that more is required to ensure that we are confident that all professionals in Shropshire are accessing the highest quality of safeguarding training. Moving on to 25-26, the partnership agreed a clear strategic focus on improving multi-agency practice alongside continued priority attention to child sexual abuse, child neglect and exploitation. And key activities included multi-agency spotlight sessions on child neglect, hidden harm, modern risks and prevention, and ensuring learning was translated into practical improvements. The partnership continued to strengthen scrutiny, data quality and collaborative working to deliver better outcomes for children. Overall, 2024-25 was a year of significant system change, and whilst pressures did remain, the partnership can provide assurance that the safeguarding governance and accountability are stronger for that change, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to evidence that to you when we present the 25-26 report to you later this year.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that comprehensive report. Can we just ask, what measurable improvements would you say are the most significant for children and families?
I think for me, it's the I think for me, there's been lots of different improvements, but I think for me, it's the early help hubs and the family hubs. So those definitely have made a massive difference to families. Absolutely been key to families and communities as a whole, definitely.
Remember questions, please.
So, thank you. Just wanted to ask a question around section 4 of the report, capacity to deliver statutory safeguarding functions. It says that current capacity is stretched and resourcing arrangements are under review to ensure statutory duties can be met. I just wonder, can you unpack that a little bit more? Because that seems to me like a bit of a sort of a key risk, really.
Sorry.
section 4 in the report.
So is that section 4.1?
4.1, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So the capacity to deliver a statutory safeguarding function. So as you heard me say at the start, so we've had the permanent business manager has gone on a period of planned absence. I've recruited Lisa into that role on a temporary basis, and we're currently in the process of backfilling Lisa's development officer role. If you go back 6 months, certainly 9 months, we had quite a number of gaps. So when we're referencing this report, particularly during the 24-25 period, there were a number of changes, Lisa, weren't there, in terms of the team, capacity wasn't strong. Subsequent to those challenges, because just as you've described, Councillor Duncan, the risks are really quite acute. We've taken steps to ensure coverage is provided in there so that there is capacity. We're also, Lisa, aren't we, working through the work within the team and actually who's doing what, how we're doing certain things, what's the opportunity to use AI effectively, safely, what's the opportunity to engage partners more in that space. So we've cited that there because we know it's really important that members, as senior officers, we're also aware of this, and that you are, asking those questions and hopefully have received that level of assurance as well. If there are any questions further that you would want me to provide more detail around that, very happy to do so. But essentially, we've plugged the gaps that we saw. We're not in the same position, but we're very conscious. Currently, Lisa is covering both roles, and that is a known pressure that Lisa's working through. So again, we've got a live expression of interest available that'll close on Friday this week.
Yeah.
And then we're actively taking steps to address that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think it's probably important that we're kind of kept up to date with resourcing of the reforms, just to make sure that things keep pace, because that's obviously something we need to oversee. So yeah, thank you.
Final question, Susan.
Yes, I understand. Obviously, it's one of the things that was mentioned in the report was about missing children, monitoring missing children data. It mentioned moving into 2025. Obviously, that was then. This is now. So, what is happening about monitoring missing children now in 2026, and who are the missing children?
Lisa, if I take that one, because you have heard Sonia describe in Shropshire, we've got a lot of residential homes, and children from other areas other than Shropshire are placed in those homes. So when I look at the chat data that we've shared with you, I can really clearly see that I know exactly which children are missing that are open to Shropshire Children's Services, that are looked after to Shropshire, that we've got all the return home interviews taking place quickly, appropriately, all those checks and balances. I don't see that same level of data for other areas. The Director of Children's Services in those areas do that. However, our colleagues in police and health do see that, because they are the colleagues responding to those young people missing, being involved in return home interviews with health. That's the pressure that Sonia was describing is placed on the wider system partners. So there is a piece of work underway with police colleagues who are particularly interested in this and linking in nationally around what that data set looks like. So I can categorically show you, and the evidence is within the chat that we've presented, that's not a Shropshire Council concern. However, we own duties to those children who are placed in Shropshire, so we're keeping a watchful eye on that with partners.
So what sort of age are they? So are they missing from home, missing from school?
So they're missing from home, and it's the residential homes that they're missing from. So it's essentially where, so for example, if I'm a London Borough and I've placed a child into Shropshire, those residential homes hold the duty to ensure that they know where that young person is, but those young people can find a way out to that residential home, go missing, and then the normal action is then taken.
So they're missing from the system, not just missing generally.
So they will be resident in that children's home, and then will be accessing education in Shropshire. And again, that provides other challenges for Shropshire Services.
There is one other thing I'd like to ask, if I may, because we have on the report, it says that the safeguarding community is committed to increasing safety and resilience of people in Shropshire, including children and adults, with care and support needs and their communities, in order to reduce harm caused by abuse, neglect and other crime. So could I ask you if we have any sort of policy or anything in place that notifies people or becomes aware when sex offenders may be placed in communities when they're released from secure accommodation or prison, and if they are located, you know, where there may be children nearby, do we have anything in place to pick up on that situation and deal with it?
So if I respond in part, and then I think Lisa can step through the community safety aspects. So that the response will depend on the conditions of the offender. So that will be an individual case by case decision that's taken by police in conversation with the Justice Department, depending on the age of the perpetrator. With younger than 18, again, that will be youth justice. Otherwise, it would be the Justice Service and probation. I think from a community safety perspective, Lisa, there are checks and balances in place, but again, it's very relevant to the individual circumstances. I don't know whether you want to step through any of those wider community points.
Yeah, it has to be done on an individual basis. It will depend on the licensing, you know, the terms of the individual's license, and it will be done via probation, and obviously police will be aware of where that individual is and those sorts of things as well. It's not an automatic. It's not automatic that people will be notified of where people are living. There are things like Sarah's law. So if an individual knows that their child is perhaps going to be in proximity of somebody who they believe may be a risk, then they can apply by Sarah's law. But again, that's not, you can't just say, oh, I think that man down there may be a risk, so I'm going to activate Sarah's law. It's because you think that your child is at risk. You know, you can't just activate Sarah's law for just some person who lives down the road because you think somebody is a sex offender. It has to be because you feel that your child is at risk or something like that. You know, it very much depends on somebody's licensing conditions, and you know, somebody wouldn't necessarily be placed next to a school if they're not allowed to be there anyway. So, you know,
what I'm getting at is there's no requirement for them to tell you that information, the council, that information.
It will depend on the individual circumstances.
Individual, yes. On
if
the individual
there is a specific need for the council to be notified, then we will be. But if that's not part of the probation conditions, then we wouldn't be. And that's very much around the confidentiality and trying to respect the return to the community environment of the individual. Where we've had situations where members of the community have become concerned around that, absolutely they can report that into Children's Services or the police, and then appropriate steps will be taken to assure ourselves that there are no reasons why we've not been notified. But you know, that's the course of action that we would take.
Thank you, David. We've got 5 minutes left for the meeting has to close, unfortunately. Thank you for the If there's any further questions anyone has, if you'd like to email, we can email them. Mark, do you have a quick one you want to come in?
It's just a quick one, really. It's an excellent report, you know, something that's really concerning. Something that concerns me is there's nothing in there that says the people who make a report is protected, because I've known, and it's happened to me, that I made the school aware of a situation that turned volatile towards me because I was thrown under the bus and told, the parents were told that I'd reported it, which, you know, when taxi drivers are flagging this up, if this happens to a lot of them, they'll just turn around and say, I won't bother again, which is wrong, and we don't want that.
That does surprise me.
Yeah.
That's certainly not the case to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, the heads
has been reported as confidential.
Yeah. I think there should be something in there to protect the people who are making the report.
So any referral, so anyone can make a referral to Children's Social Care, Children's Services, whether that's at the referral stage or making a contact and just sharing information. They can do that anonymously, and they can also do that in a number of ways. So If that's something, again, we can circulate the contact numbers via the portal, via email, or via a phone line as well. So in those instances, we would expect a follow-up conversation to be had with the school or setting in that instance to say that wasn't the right course of action. We would expect, you know, anyone to be able to raise concerns appropriately, because we all have a duty that goes beyond data protection to share safeguarding information.
Don't just go. Like we're given, when we do our safeguarding course, we're given all those contacts, but of course we're told through the contracts that the first port of call is the headmaster at the school, which I did, and then he came out and told me that they said who'd, like, obviously it's either a taxi driver or school it's come from, but they named me.
We'll have a conversation with perhaps David at a later stage, just so you can investigate this a little bit further for us, if you wouldn't mind.
If you want to send me some details, I'm very happy to do that.
Yeah, I think if we communicate with David, I think we need to look into that a bit more, because that does concern me, to be honest with you. Thank you very much for this evening. The final thing is update on the SEND transport. We've looked at the legal requirements of it now. Our next stage basically is to have a meeting with the officers, portfolio holders, to explore it in person, some of the issues we have there as well. Order work programme, I think the best recommendation, Tom, is, would it be an idea to circulate it, or would you like to go?
I think, well, the work programme's attached to this, but what I would say with the work programming for all committees, you should have had an invitation through to hold, I think, the 9th of June in your calendars. We're doing a strategic work programming session, so we're going to try and get all of the non-exec members together with senior officers, so that it can be what's coming up in the next 12 to 24 months. What are the big things which are coming up, which you can use to inform your work programming, but equally look across all of the committees and make sure that we're joined up. So the point Duncan raised around the housing is about making sure that those topics are picked up, and we're looking across the piece. So each committee can still set its work programme, but we want to use that session to really set that strategic context, and also draw on, I think, the corporate plan at that point as well, and make sure that each committee's work programme leans back into the corporate plan and the delivery of the corporate plan.
Thank you. We'll obviously bear in mind some of these discussions we've had this evening as well, and some of the follow-up information we want from in the different reports as well. Thank you very much indeed for your time this evening, and members for all the work you've done looking at the papers in advance. We've had lots of productive conversations. We'll declare the meeting closed now. Just a reminder that the date of the next meeting is Wednesday the 1st of July at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.